Sins of Pleasure Part 1. A new beginning. Amelia stepped out of the taxi and onto the bustling sidewalk, feeling the overwhelming pulse of the city wash over her. Towering skyscrapers loomed above, casting long shadows in the fading sunlight, and the constant hum of traffic, voices, and the rhythmic clatter of footsteps filled the air. She had left behind her sleepy hometown of Westbrook, with its tree-lined streets and familiar faces, for this, the concrete jungle that was her ticket to a new life. The city had been calling her for years, whispering promises of success and excitement, far removed from the quiet monotony of her old life. She was determined to make it here, no matter the cost. Amelia had always been ambitious, a trait that had set her apart from her peers back home. While others were content to settle down with local jobs and predictable lives, she dreamed of more. Much more. Now, as she stood in front of the modest apartment building she would call home, a mixture of nerves and excitement bubbled inside her. This was her chance. Her new beginning. She was ready to reinvent herself, and no one from her past would hold her back. Dragging her suitcase up the few steps to the entrance, she let herself in and made her way to the elevator. Her new place wasn't glamorous, far from it. But it was hers, and it was in the heart of the city, just blocks away from where she'd be starting her job as a marketing assistant at one of the most prestigious advertising firms. As the elevator ascended, Amelia allowed herself a moment to reflect. Her life had changed so rapidly. Just weeks ago, she had been saying goodbye to her family and friends, promising to stay in touch, though she knew the likelihood of that happening was slim. She was ready to embrace her future without looking back. The past was a weight she had long carried, and she had no intention of letting it slow her down anymore. With a soft ding, the elevator doors opened, and Amelia stepped out into a dimly lit hallway. She found her apartment easily, unlocked the door, and pushed it open. The apartment was small, just a single room with a kitchenette, a living space, and a bed tucked into the corner. But it was clean and modern, with large windows that offered a view of the busy streets below. It was everything she needed. After setting her suitcase down, Amelia moved to the window and gazed out at the city. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting the streets in a golden glow, and the city lights were just beginning to flicker to life. She smiled to herself, feeling the excitement return. This was the first step in her journey, and she couldn't wait to see where it led. A chance encounter the first week at her new job passed in a blur. Amelia quickly realized that the fast-paced world of advertising was exactly what she had been looking for. The firm was filled with talented, driven individuals who thrived on the challenges of creating campaigns that could sway millions. It was a high-pressure environment, but she found that she thrived under the stress. Every day brought a new challenge, a new opportunity to prove herself. By the time Friday rolled around, Amelia felt like she had found her footing. She was exhausted, but exhilarated. Her coworkers had invited her out for drinks to celebrate the end of the week, and she had eagerly accepted. This was exactly the kind of life she had envisioned: after-work drinks in trendy bars, conversations filled with ambition and ideas, and a social scene that pulsed with energy. They ended up at a chic rooftop bar in the heart of downtown, the kind of place with sleek decor, dim lighting, and overpriced cocktails. Amelia sipped her drink, feeling a sense of accomplishment. She had done it. She had made it to the city, and she was fitting in. She listened to her coworkers chat, laughing along at their stories, though she didn't know any of the people they were talking about. After an hour or so, Amelia excused herself to get some fresh air. The rooftop bar was open to the night sky, and a gentle breeze swept across her skin as she leaned against the railing, looking out at the twinkling lights of the city. It was breathtaking. She couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at how far she had come in such a short time. "Beautiful, isn't it?" The voice came from beside her, smooth and deep, with a hint of amusement. Startled, Amelia turned her head to find a man standing next to her. He was tall, with dark hair that fell in loose waves around his sharp features. His suit was impeccably tailored, and his dark eyes gleamed in the low light. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew her in immediately. "It is," she agreed, her voice a little breathless. She hadn't noticed him approach, and now that he was standing so close, she felt a strange, inexplicable pull toward him. He smiled, a slow, almost predatory curve of his lips. "I'm Gabriel," he said, extending a hand. "Amelia," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, and his skin was warm against hers. "I haven't seen you here before," Gabriel remarked, leaning casually against the railing, his gaze never leaving hers. "New to the city?" Amelia nodded. "Just moved here a week ago." "It's been a whirlwind, to say the least." Gabriel chuckled, a low, velvety sound that sent a shiver down her spine. "The city has that effect. But you seem like someone who can handle herself." "I like to think so," Amelia replied, feeling a surge of confidence. There was something about Gabriel that made her feel bold, daring even. They talked for a while longer, the conversation flowing effortlessly. Gabriel was charming, with a sharp wit and an easy smile. He asked her about her job, her aspirations, and she found herself opening up to him in a way that surprised her. There was something about him that made her want to impress him, to prove that she was worthy of his attention. As the night wore on, Amelia couldn't help but notice the way Gabriel looked at her, as if he could see right through her. It was both thrilling and unnerving. There was an intensity to him, a quiet power that she couldn't quite place. But she found herself drawn to it, to him. By the time they said their goodbyes, Amelia felt a strange sense of anticipation buzzing under her skin. Gabriel had given her his number, and as she tucked the small slip of paper into her pocket, she couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to see him again. The intrigue of desire. The next morning, Amelia woke with a smile on her face. Thoughts of Gabriel lingered in her mind as she got ready for the day, her heart beating a little faster every time she remembered his dark eyes, his confident smile. It had been a long time since anyone had made her feel that way, so alive, so desired. As she went about her Saturday morning routine, she couldn't shake the thought of him. Should she text him? Call him? She didn't want to seem too eager, but she also didn't want to let the opportunity slip away. There was something about Gabriel that intrigued her, something that made her want to know more. After debating with herself for most of the morning, she finally decided to send him a text. "Good morning, Gabriel. It was nice meeting you last night." Amelia, she hit send before she could second-guess herself and then set her phone aside, trying not to overthink it. She busied herself with tidying up her apartment, but every few minutes, she found herself glancing at her phone, waiting for a response. When her phone buzzed a few minutes later, her heart leapt. "Good morning, Amelia. The pleasure was mine. How about we continue our conversation over dinner tonight?" Gabriel, a rush of excitement coursed through her as she read the message. Dinner with Gabriel. She quickly typed out a response, agreeing to meet him, and as soon as she hit send, she felt a surge of anticipation. That evening, as Amelia stood in front of her closet, she found herself feeling nervous for the first time in a long while. Gabriel had an air of sophistication about him, and she wanted to look her best. She finally settled on a sleek black dress that hugged her curves and a pair of heels that gave her a little extra confidence. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. When she arrived at the restaurant Gabriel had chosen, she was immediately impressed. It was an upscale place, the kind with dim lighting, plush velvet booths, and a wine list that was longer than the menu. Gabriel was waiting for her near the entrance, and as soon as she saw him, her nerves melted away. "Amelia," he greeted her with that same slow smile that had captivated her the night before. "You look stunning." "Thank you," she replied, feeling a blush creep into her cheeks. They were seated at a corner table, the ambience intimate and romantic. As they talked, Amelia found herself drawn to Gabriel even more. He was intelligent, articulate, and he had a way of making her feel like she was the only person in the room. But there was also something darker about him, something that she couldn't quite put her finger on. It was as if he was holding something back, a part of himself that he wasn't ready to reveal. As the night wore on, the conversation shifted from light banter to something deeper, more intense. Gabriel leaned in closer, his eyes locked on hers. "Tell me, Amelia," he said, his voice low and smooth, "what do you want?" The question caught her off guard, and for a moment, she wasn't sure how to answer. But as she looked into his eyes, she realized that he wasn't asking about her career or her ambitions. He was asking about her desires, her deepest, most hidden wants. I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "I think you do." Part 2, Into the Unknown. Amelia's heart raced as Gabriel's words lingered in the air between them. "What do you want?" The intensity of the question struck her in a way that felt almost physical, like the ground shifting beneath her feet. Her mind whirred, searching for an answer, but deep down she knew what Gabriel was asking. It wasn't about her aspirations or even her simple desires. He was asking something far more personal, more intimate, and it scared her. But it thrilled her, too. She swallowed hard, her eyes meeting his. "I don't know if I'm ready to say." Gabriel leaned back slightly, his gaze never leaving her face. "That's okay," he said softly. "Sometimes, it's more exciting not to know. It makes discovery that much sweeter." His words seemed to settle into her bones, filling her with a strange sense of anticipation. She had always been in control of her life, meticulously planning every step of her career, her move to the city, her climb up the ladder. But with Gabriel, it felt different, unpredictable, almost dangerous. There was a part of her that wanted to run, to flee back to the safety of her routine, but a stronger part of her, the one that had brought her to this city in the first place, was drawn to the unknown. Drawn to him. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversation, food, and wine, but Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between them. By the time they left the restaurant, she felt as though she had crossed some invisible line, and there was no going back. Gabriel walked her to her apartment building, his presence a quiet, comforting shadow beside her. When they reached the entrance, he paused, turning to face her. "I had a wonderful time tonight, Amelia." "Me too," she replied, her voice softer than she had intended. He smiled, that slow, almost predatory smile that made her pulse quicken. I hope we can do it again soon. She nodded, biting her lower lip. I'd like that. With one last lingering look, Gabriel turned and walked away, disappearing into the night. Amelia stood there for a moment, staring after him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had the distinct feeling that she had just set something in motion, something she didn't fully understand, but she couldn't help but be excited by the thought. The deepening connection over the next few weeks, Amelia and Gabriel's connection deepened in ways she hadn't anticipated. They saw each other often, dinner dates, late-night drinks, and long walks through the city. Gabriel was attentive, always asking about her day, her dreams, her thoughts. But there was also a side of him that remained elusive, a part of him he kept hidden behind those dark, knowing eyes. Despite his air of mystery, or perhaps because of it, Amelia found herself falling for him. There was something magnetic about Gabriel, something that drew her in and held her captive. He was everything she had ever wanted in a man, confident, intelligent, successful, but there was also an edge to him, a darkness that thrilled her. One night, after a particularly grueling day at work, Gabriel invited her over to his apartment. She had never been to his place before, and when she arrived, she was struck by how different it was from what she had imagined. It wasn't the sleek, modern space she had pictured. Instead, it was warm and inviting, filled with rich colors and soft textures. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with old, leather-bound volumes, and the scent of sandalwood hung in the air. As she stepped inside, Gabriel greeted her with a glass of wine and a soft smile. "Make yourself at home," he said, gesturing for her to sit on the plush velvet couch. Amelia sat down, feeling a little nervous. There was something intimate about being in his space, something that made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't expected. Gabriel sat down beside her, his eyes searching hers. "You seem tense," he remarked, his voice low and soothing. "I guess I've just had a long day," she admitted, taking a sip of her wine. "Work's been stressful." "Tell me about it," he urged, leaning in closer. For the next hour, Amelia talked about her job, her frustrations, her hopes for the future. Gabriel listened intently, his gaze never wavering. It felt good to open up to him, to share the parts of herself she usually kept hidden from the world. By the time she had finished, she felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "You're incredibly strong, you know that," Gabriel said softly, reaching out to brush a strand of hair behind her ear. Amelia felt a shiver run down her spine at the touch. "I don't always feel that way," she admitted. "You are," he insisted, his voice filled with conviction. "You came to this city on your own, built a life for yourself from nothing. That takes strength, Amelia." His words touched something deep inside her, something she hadn't realized she needed to hear. She smiled at him, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she whispered. Gabriel's gaze softened, and for a moment, they sat in silence, the air between them charged with an unspoken tension. Then, slowly, he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if he was waiting for her to respond. But when she kissed him back, the kiss deepened, becoming more urgent, more demanding. Amelia's heart raced as she felt his hand slide around her waist, pulling her closer. She could feel the heat of his body against hers, the strength in his arms, and it made her dizzy with desire. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing heavily, their foreheads pressed together. "I've wanted to do that since the night we met," Gabriel murmured, his voice husky. Amelia smiled, her heart still racing. "Me too." For the rest of the evening, they remained tangled in each other's arms, the world outside forgotten. As the night wore on, Amelia felt herself falling deeper into the intoxicating pull of Gabriel's presence. There was something about him that made her feel alive in a way she hadn't felt before, something that made her want to lose herself in him completely. But as the night stretched on, and the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to Gabriel, something he wasn't telling her. She could feel it in the way he looked at her, in the way he held her, as if he was holding back, as if there was a part of him that remained locked away. She didn't know what it was, but she knew one thing for certain: she wanted to find out. The mystery unfolds the next morning. Amelia woke to find herself alone in Gabriel's bed. For a moment, she felt a pang of disappointment, but it quickly faded when she saw the note on the pillow beside her. "Had to step out for a meeting. Take your time getting ready. I'll see you tonight." Gabriel smiling to herself, she got out of bed and padded barefoot to the kitchen. As she poured herself a cup of coffee, she couldn't help but think about the night before. It had been perfect, too perfect. And that was what worried her. She liked Gabriel. More than liked him, if she was being honest with herself. But there was still so much she didn't know about him. He had told her bits and pieces about his life, his job, his family, but there were large gaps in his story, things he hadn't mentioned. And then there was the way he looked at her, as if he was trying to figure her out, as if he was waiting for something. As she sipped her coffee, Amelia's phone buzzed on the counter. It was a text from her best friend, Megan. "Hey, haven't heard from you in a while. How's the new life in the big city? Miss you." Amelia smiled, but the text also reminded her of how distant she had become since moving to the city. She hadn't talked to Megan in over a week, hadn't told her about Gabriel or any of the new things happening in her life. "Miss you too." She typed back. "Things are going great. I'll fill you in soon, promise." As she hit send, she couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Megan had been her rock back in Westbrook, the one person she had always confided in. But now, things felt different. Her life in the city felt like a world away from the one she had left behind, and she wasn't sure how to bridge the gap. With a sigh, Amelia set her phone down and turned her thoughts back to Gabriel. She needed to know more about him, to understand the part of him that remained hidden. There was a mystery surrounding him, and she was determined to unravel it. Part 3: Secrets Beneath the Surface. The day passed slowly, each hour dragging on as Amelia went through the motions at work. Her thoughts were consumed by Gabriel, their night together, the mystery that surrounded him, and the pull he had on her. There was a nagging feeling in the back of her mind, a voice that whispered she was getting in over her head, but she pushed it aside. She was drawn to Gabriel in a way she had never been drawn to anyone before, and she wasn't ready to walk away from that. That evening, Amelia found herself standing in front of the mirror, her hands trembling slightly as she applied the finishing touches to her makeup. Gabriel had invited her to a private event, something about a fundraiser for an exclusive art gallery, and while she was excited, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight was going to be different. She could feel it in the pit of her stomach, a nervous anticipation that kept building with every passing minute. She smoothed down the fabric of her dress, a deep red that clung to her curves, and took a deep breath. This wasn't just another date. Gabriel was taking her into his world, a world she knew little about but was desperate to understand. When she arrived at the event, Gabriel was waiting for her at the entrance, looking impossibly handsome in a sleek black suit. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and the look in his eyes as he saw her sent a shiver down her spine. "You look stunning," he murmured, taking her hand and pulling her close for a brief kiss. "So do you," she replied, her voice a little breathless. As they walked inside, Amelia was immediately struck by the grandeur of the venue. The gallery was housed in a historic building with high ceilings and ornate chandeliers that cast a soft glow over the room. Expensive artwork adorned the walls, and the air was filled with the quiet hum of conversation and the clink of champagne glasses. Gabriel led her through the crowd with ease, greeting people with polite nods and handshakes. He seemed completely at home here, moving with a confidence that Amelia couldn't help but admire. But as they made their way deeper into the gallery, she noticed something else: the way people looked at Gabriel. It wasn't just respect or admiration. There was something else in their eyes, something that looked almost like fear. Amelia brushed it off, telling herself she was being paranoid. But the feeling lingered, and as the night went on, it became harder to ignore. The invitation at one point during the evening, as they were sipping champagne and admiring a particularly striking piece of modern art, a man approached them. He was tall and lean, with sharp features and cold blue eyes that made Amelia feel uneasy the moment they locked onto her. "Gabriel," the man greeted him, his voice smooth but with an edge that made Amelia's skin crawl. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." Gabriel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Good to see you too, Daniel. It's been a while." Daniel's gaze flicked to Amelia, and a slow, predatory smile spread across his lips. "And who is this lovely creature?" "Amelia," Gabriel said, his tone suddenly colder. "She's with me." Daniel raised an eyebrow, but his smile didn't falter. "Of course she is." He extended a hand to Amelia. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Amelia." Reluctantly, Amelia took his hand, feeling an icy chill run through her as his fingers brushed hers. "Nice to meet you too," she replied, her voice barely audible. Daniel held her hand a little too long before finally letting go. "I hope Gabriel is treating you well," he said, his eyes gleaming with something dark. Before Amelia could respond, Gabriel stepped forward, placing a protective arm around her waist. "We should be going," he said, his voice tight. Daniel's smile widened, but he didn't say anything as Gabriel led Amelia away, his grip on her waist firm. As they moved through the crowd, Amelia glanced up at him, noticing the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes had darkened. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No one you need to worry about," Gabriel replied, his tone clipped. But Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that she had just stepped into something much bigger than she had realized. The way Daniel had looked at her, the way Gabriel had reacted, it all felt wrong. They left the gallery shortly after, the tension between them palpable. Amelia wanted to ask more, to push Gabriel for answers, but something held her back. She didn't want to ruin the night, and she didn't want to push Gabriel away. But the questions swirled in her mind, refusing to be silenced. Unraveling the mystery, the days that followed were filled with a strange, simmering tension. Amelia saw Gabriel often, and while their relationship continued to deepen, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he wasn't telling her. He was still the same charming, attentive man she had fallen for, but there were moments when his smile didn't reach his eyes, when a shadow passed over his face, and she was reminded of that night at the gallery. Then, one evening, as they were lying in bed together, the question she had been holding back finally slipped out. Who was Daniel? Gabriel stiffened beside her, his arms still wrapped around her waist. For a moment, he didn't respond, and Amelia's heart began to race. He's an old acquaintance, Gabriel said finally, his voice careful. An acquaintance. Amelia pressed, sitting up slightly. He seemed like more than that. The way he looked at you, the way he looked at me, Amelia, Gabriel cut her off, his voice sharper than she had ever heard it. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's complicated. Amelia frowned, her heart sinking. She hated that word. Complicated was a way of avoiding the truth, a way of pushing her away. Then explain it to me, she said softly. I want to understand. Gabriel was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and measured. Daniel and I used to work together. A long time ago. Things ended badly. Amelia waited for him to elaborate, but he didn't. Frustration bubbled up inside her. That's it. That's all you're going to tell me. It's not something I like to talk about, Gabriel replied, his tone flat. But I'm not just anyone, Gabriel, Amelia said, her voice trembling. I'm with you. Don't you think I deserve to know? Gabriel's eyes flicked to hers, and for a moment, she saw something in them, fear, maybe even regret. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by the cool, composed expression she had grown used to. I care about you, Amelia, Gabriel said softly, reaching out to take her hand. More than you know. But there are things in my past that I'd rather keep buried. I don't want them to come between us. Amelia's heart ached at his words. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he was telling her the truth. But there was a part of her that couldn't ignore the feeling that he was still holding something back. I don't want any secrets between us, she whispered. There are no secrets that matter, Gabriel said, pulling her closer. Only you. You're the only thing that matters. Amelia wanted to believe him. She wanted to let go of the doubts that had been swirling in her mind, to trust that Gabriel was being honest with her. But as she rested her head against his chest, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. The warning a few days later, as Amelia was walking to work, she received a message from an unknown number. Frowning, she opened it, her heart skipping a beat as she read the words, "Be careful. You don't know who you're dealing with." Amelia's pulse quickened, her mind racing. She glanced around, suddenly feeling exposed, vulnerable. Who had sent the message? Was it Daniel? Or someone else? She debated whether to show it to Gabriel, but something stopped her. He had already been so evasive, so unwilling to share the truth. Would he even tell her if he knew who had sent it? Instead, she deleted the message, shoving her phone back into her purse. She would keep it to herself for now, but the feeling of unease lingered. Part 4. The ties that bind. Amelia spent the next few days in a haze of uncertainty. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that the message she had received wasn't just a harmless prank or a vague warning. There was a real threat lurking in the shadows, something she didn't fully understand, but she was determined to figure it out. Her relationship with Gabriel continued as usual on the surface. They went out to dinners, took late-night walks through the city, and spent their evenings wrapped up in each other's arms. But the tension between them was undeniable. Amelia couldn't stop thinking about Daniel, about the cryptic message, and the secrets Gabriel was keeping from her. It was becoming harder to pretend that everything was fine. One evening, as they were lounging on the couch in Gabriel's apartment, Amelia found herself unable to stay silent any longer. She had to know the truth, all of it. "Gabriel," she began, her voice hesitant, "I need to ask you something." He looked over at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "What's on your mind?" She swallowed hard, trying to steady her nerves. "That message I got the other day. I didn't tell you about it, but someone texted me. They said I didn't know who I was dealing with." Gabriel's expression didn't change, but she could see a flicker of something in his eyes, fear, maybe, or anger. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked quietly. "I didn't know what to think," she admitted. "I wasn't sure if it was a joke or if it was something more serious. But now, I need to know. Who sent that message? Is it Daniel? Is he trying to scare me?" Gabriel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Amelia, I told you before, Daniel is trouble. He has a way of getting into people's heads, making them doubt everything. But I don't think he's behind the message." "Then who is?" she pressed. "I'm scared, Gabriel. I don't know who to trust anymore." Gabriel stood up, pacing the room. His face was tense, the lines around his eyes more pronounced than she had ever seen them. Finally, he stopped and turned to face her, his expression dark. "There are things about my life that you don't know," he said slowly. "Things I've kept from you because I didn't want to drag you into them. But if you're going to stay with me, you need to understand the kind of world I'm part of." Amelia's heart raced. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when Gabriel would finally tell her the truth. "I'm listening," she said softly. Gabriel took a deep breath before speaking. "Daniel and I weren't just business partners. We were involved in something bigger. Something dangerous." Amelia frowned, trying to process his words. "Dangerous how?" "It started as a simple business venture, investments, high returns, nothing illegal. But over time, things escalated. Daniel got involved with the wrong people, made deals that were shady at best, and eventually, I found myself caught in the middle of it. By the time I realized how deep we were in, it was too late to walk away." Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. "What kind of deals? What were you doing?" Gabriel hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Money laundering, embezzlement, all tied to high-profile clients. We were moving large sums of money under the radar, and it got dangerous fast." Amelia stared at him, her mind reeling. "You were laundering money." "Not by choice," Gabriel said quickly. "At first, I didn't know what I was getting into. By the time I found out, I was in too deep. But I tried to get out. I cut ties with Daniel, distanced myself from the whole operation. That's why he's been so hostile lately. He thinks I owe him something." Amelia felt like the ground was shifting beneath her. Everything she thought she knew about Gabriel was crumbling, replaced by a darker, more dangerous reality. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I didn't want you to be afraid," Gabriel said, his voice soft. "I didn't want you to see me as the person I used to be. I'm trying to make things right now, but it's complicated. Daniel won't let go easily, and I don't want you to get caught in the crossfire." Amelia was silent for a long moment, trying to process everything. She wanted to be angry with Gabriel for keeping such a huge part of his life hidden from her, but more than anything, she was scared. This wasn't just about their relationship anymore, this was about her safety. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Gabriel came over to her, kneeling in front of her and taking her hands in his. "Now, we move forward. Together. I'll protect you, Amelia. I promise." But even as he said the words, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that they were in over their heads. The breaking point. The next few weeks passed in a blur of tension and unease. Gabriel tried to act like everything was normal, but Amelia could see the strain in his eyes, the way he tensed every time his phone buzzed or someone knocked on the door. She could feel the distance growing between them, a chasm that she didn't know how to bridge. One evening, as they were getting ready for bed, Amelia's phone buzzed with a text. She glanced at the screen and froze. "You can't trust him. He's not who he says he is." Her blood ran cold as she stared at the message. She didn't recognize the number, but the warning was clear. Her heart raced as she showed the message to Gabriel. "Is this from Daniel?" she asked, her voice trembling. Gabriel's face darkened as he read the message. "It might be. He's trying to turn you against me, Amelia. Don't let him." "But what if it's true?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if there's more you're not telling me?" Gabriel grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but not painful. "I've told you everything that matters. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to make things right. You have to believe me." Amelia's mind was spinning. She wanted to believe him, but the doubt that had been festering in her mind for weeks was growing stronger. The messages, the secrets, the danger that seemed to follow Gabriel wherever he went, it was all too much. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered, pulling away from him. Gabriel's face fell, his eyes filled with hurt. "Amelia. I just need some time," she said quickly, grabbing her purse and heading for the door. "I need to think." "Amelia, wait," Gabriel called after her, but she was already out the door, her heart pounding in her chest as she fled down the stairs and out into the night. The cool night air hit her like a wave as she stepped onto the street, her mind racing. She had no idea where she was going, only that she needed to get away, to clear her head. For the first time since meeting Gabriel, she felt truly alone. An unexpected ally as Amelia wandered aimlessly through the city, her phone buzzed again. She pulled it out, half expecting another cryptic message from the unknown sender. But instead, it was a call. From Daniel. Her breath caught in her throat as she stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the decline button. But something stopped her. Maybe it was the overwhelming need for answers, or maybe it was the gnawing curiosity that had been building inside her since the night they met. Whatever it was, she hesitated long enough for her curiosity to win out. She pressed accept. "Amelia," Daniel's smooth voice came through the phone, sending a shiver down her spine. "I'm glad you finally picked up." "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "To help you," Daniel replied, his tone calm and measured. "I think it's time you learned the truth about Gabriel." Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. What truth? Meet me tomorrow, Daniel said, ignoring her question. I'll explain everything. Before Amelia could respond, the line went dead. She stood there for a long moment, staring at her phone, her mind racing. Part of her knew it was a terrible idea to meet with Daniel. He was dangerous, manipulative, and clearly had his own agenda. But another part of her, the part that was tired of the lies and the secrets, was desperate for answers. And right now, Daniel was the only one offering them. Part 5. Dangerous Liaisons. The next day felt like a blur to Amelia. She spent the morning at work, but her mind was elsewhere, distracted by thoughts of the mysterious meeting with Daniel. She couldn't focus, couldn't sit still. Her thoughts kept returning to Gabriel, to his promise that he would protect her, to the secrets that still hovered between them like a dark cloud. And now, she was about to meet the one person he had warned her to stay away from. When her lunch break finally came, Amelia left the office, her heart racing as she made her way to the small cafe where Daniel had asked to meet. It was a quiet, unassuming place, tucked away on a side street. It didn't seem like the kind of place where dangerous dealings would take place, but maybe that's what made it perfect. Discreet. Safe. Or at least, it appeared to be. As she pushed open the door and stepped inside, she immediately spotted Daniel sitting at a corner table, his gaze fixed on her as if he had been waiting for her all along. He smiled as she approached, that same unsettling smile that had made her uncomfortable the first time they met. Amelia, he greeted her, standing to pull out her chair. I'm glad you came. She sat down, her pulse quickening as she tried to remain composed. I don't have much time. What is it you wanted to tell me? Daniel sat back down, folding his hands on the table in front of him. I'm not going to waste your time, Amelia. I'm sure you've already started to notice that Gabriel isn't exactly the man he claims to be. Amelia's heart pounded. She wanted to defend Gabriel, but the doubts she had been harboring for weeks were too strong to ignore. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice shaky. Daniel leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. Gabriel has been involved in some very shady dealings, and while he might have convinced you that he's trying to change, the truth is, he's still in deep. Deeper than you realize. Amelia frowned, her stomach churning with anxiety. What kind of dealings? Money laundering, embezzlement, illegal trades, the list goes on, Daniel said smoothly. He's been laundering money through a network of shell companies, and he's been using people like you to cover his tracks. Amelia's blood ran cold. People like me. Yes, people he can manipulate, Daniel said, his eyes gleaming with something dark. You're just a pawn in his game, Amelia. He's using you to keep up appearances, to make it look like he's gone legitimate. But trust me, he hasn't. And if you stay with him, you're going to get hurt. Amelia's hands trembled in her lap as she processed Daniel's words. Could it be true? Could Gabriel really be using her, manipulating her to cover his tracks? The thought was horrifying, but a small part of her couldn't dismiss it entirely. Gabriel had been keeping secrets from her, and now she was starting to wonder if those secrets were more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Why are you telling me this? She asked finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel smiled, leaning back in his chair. Because I want to help you. I care about what happens to you, Amelia. And I know that you're smart enough to realize that Gabriel isn't the man you think he is. Amelia stared at him, her mind racing. She didn't know what to believe. On the one hand, Daniel had every reason to want to turn her against Gabriel. They were former partners, and from what Gabriel had told her, their relationship had ended badly. But on the other hand, Daniel's words rang with a certain truth, a truth that aligned with the doubts that had been building in her mind for weeks. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "What do you want from me?" Daniel's smile widened. "I want you to walk away from Gabriel before it's too late. You deserve better, Amelia. You deserve someone who's going to protect you, not someone who's going to drag you down with them." Amelia's heart raced as she looked into Daniel's eyes. There was something about the way he was looking at her, something that made her feel uneasy. But there was also a part of her that wanted to believe him, that wanted to believe that she could escape from this dangerous web before it ensnared her completely. "I'll think about it," she said finally, standing up from the table. Daniel nodded, his expression calm. "Just remember, Amelia, the longer you stay with Gabriel, the more you risk losing. Your safety, your freedom, it's all at stake." She turned to leave, her mind spinning with confusion and fear. As she walked out of the cafe and back onto the busy street, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Her heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time since moving to the city, she felt truly unsafe. The confrontation that evening, Amelia returned to her apartment, her thoughts consumed by the conversation with Daniel. She paced the floor, trying to make sense of everything, but the more she thought about it, the more conflicted she felt. Was Daniel telling the truth, or was he just trying to manipulate her? And if Gabriel really was involved in something dangerous, what did that mean for her? Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen to see a message from Gabriel. "I'll be over in 10 minutes. We need to talk." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't told Gabriel about meeting with Daniel, but she had a feeling he knew. And she wasn't sure she was ready to face him. When Gabriel arrived, he looked tense, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something darker. He stepped into the apartment, his eyes scanning her face as if he could sense the turmoil she was feeling. "You met with Daniel," he said, his voice low. It wasn't a question. Amelia swallowed hard, nodding. "I did." Gabriel's jaw clenched, and he took a step closer to her. "Amelia, whatever he told you, it's a lie. He's trying to turn you against me." "But why would he do that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why would he go out of his way to warn me if there wasn't something real behind it?" "Because he wants to destroy me," Gabriel said, his voice harsh. "He's been trying to ruin me for years, and now he's using you to get to me. Don't you see? He's playing a game, and you're the pawn." Amelia's heart pounded as she looked into Gabriel's eyes. She wanted to believe him, but the doubt that had been festering inside her was stronger than ever. "Gabriel, I've tried to trust you," she said, her voice breaking. "But you've kept so many secrets from me. And now I don't know what to believe." Gabriel's expression softened, and he reached out to take her hands in his. "Amelia, please. I've told you everything that matters. Yes, I've made mistakes. Yes, I've been involved in things I'm not proud of. But I'm trying to make it right. And I care about you more than anything. I need you to trust me." Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes as she looked at him. She could see the sincerity in his face, the desperation in his voice. But there was still a part of her that couldn't let go of the fear, the doubt. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. Gabriel's grip tightened on her hands, his eyes pleading. "Amelia, please. Don't let Daniel come between us. Don't let him win." Amelia's heart ached as she looked into Gabriel's eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he was telling her the truth. But the shadows that had been lurking between them for so long were too strong to ignore. "I need time," she said softly, pulling her hands away. Gabriel's face fell, his expression filled with hurt. "Amelia. I just need to think," she said, her voice trembling. "I need to figure out what's real." Gabriel stared at her for a long moment, his eyes filled with something she couldn't quite decipher. Finally, he nodded, his jaw tight. "Take all the time you need," he said quietly, turning to leave. As the door closed behind him, Amelia sank onto the couch, tears streaming down her face. She had never felt more lost, more confused. The man she had fallen for was still a mystery, and she wasn't sure if she could ever truly know him. Part 6, Torn Between Two Truths. The days that followed were some of the hardest of Amelia's life. She couldn't stop thinking about Gabriel and the web of lies and danger that seemed to surround him. Every time she tried to piece together what was real and what wasn't, she felt more lost than before. The warning from Daniel, the secrets Gabriel had kept, and her own fear were all pulling her in different directions. She had taken time to think, but with every passing day, she found it harder to come to any real conclusions. On one hand, she still felt the deep connection she had with Gabriel. The way he looked at her, touched her, and made her feel alive in ways she had never experienced before, that was real. She couldn't deny the passion and intensity of their relationship, and a part of her wanted to believe that Gabriel was telling the truth. He had made mistakes, but maybe he was genuinely trying to change, to protect her. But then there was Daniel's warning. He had painted a different picture of Gabriel, one where she was just another pawn in his dangerous game. If Daniel was right, staying with Gabriel could mean risking everything, her safety, her freedom, her life. The thought terrified her, and she couldn't ignore the fact that Gabriel had been keeping things from her for so long. She was torn between two versions of the truth, and no matter which way she leaned, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to make a choice she could never undo. A return to the past desperate for answers, Amelia decided to take matters into her own hands. She couldn't rely on Daniel's words alone, and Gabriel had proven that he wasn't willing to tell her everything. If she wanted to uncover the truth, she would have to do it herself. One afternoon, Amelia found herself standing outside the building where Gabriel's old office had been, the place where he and Daniel had worked together before everything fell apart. The building was in an upscale part of town, a sleek, modern structure with large glass windows that gleamed in the sunlight. She had never been here before, but she had found the address after searching through public records. As she stepped inside, she felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. This was where it had all started, Gabriel's descent into the dangerous world he had described. If she was going to find answers, this was the place to start. The lobby was quiet, with a sleek receptionist's desk and a few plush chairs scattered around. Amelia approached the desk, her heart pounding in her chest. "Hi," she said, forcing a smile. "I'm looking for some information about a business that used to be located here." The receptionist, a young woman with a friendly smile, nodded. "Sure. What was the name of the business?" Amelia hesitated for a moment, glancing around the empty lobby. "It was called Golden Circle Investments. I think they moved out a few years ago." The receptionist's smile faltered slightly, and she glanced down at her computer. Let me check. Amelia waited, her nerves fraying as the seconds ticked by. After what felt like an eternity, the receptionist looked up again. It looks like Golden Circle Investments vacated this building about 3 years ago, she said, her voice cautious. They didn't leave much information behind, but there were some rumors about them. I'm not sure I'm supposed to say this, but I've heard they were involved in some pretty shady business. Money laundering, fraud, that sort of thing. Amelia's heart sank. Do you know where they moved to? The receptionist shook her head. I'm afraid I don't. But if they were involved in illegal activity, it's possible they dissolved the company entirely. Amelia nodded, her mind racing. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed was still a shock. Gabriel's past was darker than she had realized, and it was clear that whatever he had been involved in, it hadn't been above board. Thanks for your help, Amelia said, turning to leave. As she walked back out onto the street, her thoughts swirled with confusion and fear. Gabriel had told her he was trying to make things right, but how could she believe him now? He had been involved in something criminal, something that had left a trail of destruction in its wake. And now, she was caught in the middle of it. The invitation to trust that evening, Gabriel showed up at Amelia's apartment unexpectedly. He looked more serious than usual, his dark eyes searching her face as if he knew something had changed between them. We need to talk, he said quietly. Amelia stepped aside, letting him in. Her heart pounded as she closed the door behind him, her mind racing with everything she had learned. She wasn't sure how this conversation was going to go, but she knew it was time to confront him. Gabriel sat down on the couch, his gaze never leaving her. I can feel you pulling away from me, Amelia. And I can't stand it. I know I've made mistakes, but I need you to trust me. I'm trying to protect you. Amelia took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she sat down across from him. I went to your old office today, she said softly. Golden Circle Investments. Gabriel's face tightened, but he didn't interrupt her. They told me about the rumors, Amelia continued. About the money laundering, the fraud. Gabriel, I need to know the truth. All of it. I can't keep pretending everything is fine when I don't know what's really going on. For a long moment, Gabriel was silent. His jaw was clenched, and his eyes were filled with a mixture of pain and regret. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and raw. I never wanted to drag you into this, he said. I thought I could keep you separate from it, but I see now that was a mistake. You deserve the truth. He paused, running a hand through his dark hair. Golden Circle Investments was a front. We were moving money for some very powerful people who didn't want to get their hands dirty. At first, I didn't know the full extent of what we were doing. I thought it was just a way to make quick money. But over time, I realized how deep we were in. Daniel was the one who pushed for bigger, riskier deals, and before I knew it, we were involved in things I never should have been part of. Amelia's heart pounded as she listened to his confession. Why didn't you leave? Gabriel sighed, his shoulders slumping. I tried. I really did. But it wasn't that simple. Once you're in, you can't just walk away. These people don't let you. I cut ties with Daniel, but he's been trying to pull me back in ever since. That's why he's been messing with you, trying to turn you against me. He thinks if he can isolate me, he'll have more leverage. Amelia stared at him, her mind spinning. So, you're saying Daniel is still involved in all of this? Yes, Gabriel said, his voice grim. And he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. She had known Daniel was dangerous, but she hadn't realized just how far his influence reached. If what Gabriel was saying was true, then she wasn't just caught between two men, she was caught in the middle of something much bigger, something far more dangerous than she had imagined. "What do we do?" she whispered. Gabriel reached out, taking her hands in his. "We stick together. I'll protect you, Amelia. But I need you to trust me. We can get through this, but only if we're on the same side." Amelia's heart ached as she looked into Gabriel's eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that they could find a way out of this mess together. But there was still a part of her that couldn't ignore the fear, the doubt that had been growing inside her for so long. "I don't know if I can," she said softly, tears welling up in her eyes. "I want to, but I'm scared, Gabriel. I'm scared of what's going to happen next." Gabriel's grip tightened on her hands, his eyes filled with a fierce determination. "I'm scared too, Amelia. But I'm not going to let anything happen to you. I promise." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of everything unsaid hanging heavy between them. Amelia's mind was a whirlwind of emotions, fear, doubt, love, and longing all tangled together in a confusing knot. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Okay." Gabriel's eyes softened, and he pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "We'll figure this out. I promise." But as Amelia rested her head against his chest, the unease in her heart remained. She wanted to believe they could find a way through this, but deep down, she knew that the danger was far from over. Part 7, In Too Deep. The days that followed felt like a blur to Amelia, a chaotic mix of emotions and uncertainty. She and Gabriel spent more time together, but the weight of everything that had come to light hung heavy between them. Despite Gabriel's assurances that he would protect her, Amelia couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was growing closer with every passing day. She started to notice little things that made her feel uneasy, the way Gabriel would glance over his shoulder when they walked together, or the way his phone would buzz late at night with messages he would quickly dismiss. There was a constant tension in the air, a sense that they were being watched, followed. It made her nervous, paranoid even, but Gabriel kept reassuring her that everything would be fine as long as they stayed together. But Amelia couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in her gut that something was about to go terribly wrong. A night of revelations one evening, as they sat together in Gabriel's apartment, the air between them was thick with unspoken words. They had been trying to go back to normal, to pretend that things were okay, but it was becoming increasingly clear that nothing about their situation was normal anymore. Amelia was curled up on the couch, her mind wandering as she absent-mindedly scrolled through her phone. Gabriel sat beside her, silent and tense, his eyes fixed on the TV, though it was clear he wasn't paying attention to the show. Finally, Amelia couldn't take it anymore. She set her phone down and turned to face him. "Gabriel," she said softly, "we need to talk." He glanced over at her, his expression guarded. "What's on your mind?" Amelia took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I can't keep pretending that everything is fine. We're not safe, are we?" Gabriel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "No," he admitted. "We're not." Daniel is still out there, and he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants. Amelia's heart sank. She had known this deep down, but hearing Gabriel confirm it made the reality of their situation hit harder. "What does he want?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabriel hesitated for a moment before answering. "He wants control. He wants to pull me back into the business, to use my connections to rebuild what we had. And if I refuse, he'll go after anyone close to me. That's why I've been trying to keep you out of this." Amelia's pulse quickened. "But I'm already in it, Gabriel. I've been in it since the day we met." Gabriel's face tightened, and he reached out to take her hand. "I know. And I hate that I've put you in this position. But I'm trying to fix it. I just need more time." Amelia stared at him, her mind racing. Time. That's what Gabriel kept asking for, but how much time did they really have? She didn't know how much longer she could live like this, constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering when the next shoe would drop. "I don't know if I can keep doing this," she said softly, pulling her hand away. "I'm scared, Gabriel. I'm scared of what's going to happen next." Gabriel's face softened, and he moved closer, his eyes filled with regret. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "But I'm not going to let anything happen to you, Amelia. I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe." His words were meant to comfort her, but they only made the knot of fear in her stomach tighten. She wanted to believe him, but the danger felt too close, too real. And then there was Daniel. Every time she thought about him, her heart raced with anxiety. He was out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his chance to strike. The warning later that night, after Gabriel had gone to bed, Amelia found herself unable to sleep. She tossed and turned for what felt like hours, her mind racing with all the possibilities of what could go wrong. Eventually, she gave up and slipped out of bed, padding quietly into the living room. She sat down on the couch and stared out the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. It was peaceful outside, but the sense of calm only made the chaos inside her feel more pronounced. She felt trapped, like she was caught in a web she couldn't escape. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table, and she glanced at it, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the message. "Meet me tomorrow. You need to know the truth." Amelia's pulse quickened as she stared at the screen. The last time she had met with Daniel, he had warned her about Gabriel, about the danger she was in. And now he wanted to meet again, to tell her more. For a long moment she sat frozen, unsure of what to do. She knew she shouldn't meet with him. Gabriel had warned her that Daniel was dangerous, manipulative, and that he couldn't be trusted. But a part of her still needed answers, still needed to know the full truth. After a few minutes of hesitation, she typed out a reply. "Where?" The response came almost immediately. "The same place as before. Noon." Amelia's heart raced as she set the phone down. She knew this was a terrible idea, but she couldn't stop herself. She needed to know the truth, even if it meant putting herself in danger. The betrayal the next day, Amelia made her way to the same cafe where she had met Daniel before. Her heart pounded in her chest as she entered the small, dimly lit space. Daniel was already there, sitting at a corner table, his cold blue eyes fixed on her as she approached. "Amelia," he greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm glad you came." She sat down across from him, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to steady her nerves. "What do you want, Daniel?" Daniel leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving hers. "I want to help you. I want to give you the information you need to protect yourself." Amelia frowned. "What kind of information?" "The kind that Gabriel hasn't been honest about," Daniel said smoothly. "You think he's trying to protect you, but the truth is, he's been using you." Amelia's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" Daniel's smile widened, and he leaned in closer. "Gabriel isn't just running from his past, Amelia. He's still involved in the same illegal activities he claims to have left behind. He's using you as a cover, a way to keep up appearances. That's why he's so desperate to keep you by his side." Amelia's mind reeled. "That's not true. Gabriel said he's trying to make things right. Gabriel will say anything to keep you under his control," Daniel interrupted, his voice sharp. "He's lying to you, Amelia. He always has been." Tears welled up in Amelia's eyes as she listened to Daniel's words. She didn't want to believe him, but there was a part of her that couldn't shake the feeling that he might be right. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Daniel's expression softened, and for the first time, she saw something resembling genuine concern in his eyes. "Because I've seen what Gabriel is capable of. And I don't want you to get hurt." Amelia stared at him, her mind spinning. Could it be true? Could Gabriel really be using her, manipulating her to cover his tracks? She had trusted him, believed in him, but now everything was falling apart. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. Daniel reached across the table, gently taking her hand in his. "Believe me, Amelia. I'm the only one telling you the truth." Amelia's heart raced as she looked into Daniel's eyes. There was something about the way he was looking at her, something that made her feel like he was the only one she could trust. But at the same time, a voice in the back of her mind warned her that she was getting in too deep, that she was about to make a decision she couldn't undo. Before she could say anything, Daniel's phone buzzed, and he glanced at it, his expression darkening. "I have to go," he said quickly, standing up from the table. "But think about what I've said, Amelia. Your life depends on it." With that, he turned and left the cafe, leaving Amelia sitting alone, her mind racing with confusion and fear. As she sat there, tears streaming down her face, she realized that she was in deeper than she had ever imagined. And now, she wasn't sure if there was any way out. Part 8: The Web Tightens. The moment Daniel left the cafe, Amelia felt a crushing weight settle on her chest. His words echoed in her mind, casting doubt on everything she thought she knew about Gabriel. She sat there for what felt like hours, trying to make sense of the tangled web she had found herself in, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't escape the gnawing fear that Daniel had planted. Could Gabriel really be using her? Was she just a pawn in some elaborate scheme to cover his tracks? The idea was unbearable, but she couldn't dismiss it entirely. Gabriel had been secretive from the beginning, always keeping parts of his life hidden from her. Maybe Daniel was right. Maybe Gabriel was still involved in the same illegal activities he claimed to have left behind, and maybe she was just a convenient distraction. But then there was the other side of her heart, the side that remembered the warmth in Gabriel's eyes, the tenderness in his touch, and the way he had always been there for her when she needed him most. She wanted to believe that Gabriel cared about her, that he was telling her the truth. But how could she be sure? The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her, and for the first time, she felt truly trapped. No matter which way she turned, there was danger waiting, whether it was Gabriel's dark past or Daniel's manipulative games. She had no idea who to trust, and that terrified her. A desperate gamble, Amelia returned to her apartment that evening feeling more conflicted than ever. The weight of the choices she had to make seemed to grow heavier with each passing minute. She needed clarity, but the more she tried to untangle the mess she was in, the more complicated everything became. When Gabriel showed up later that night, she wasn't sure how to act around him. Part of her wanted to confront him, to demand answers once and for all. But another part of her was too afraid of what she might discover. If Daniel's words were true, if Gabriel really had been using her all along, she wasn't sure she could handle that kind of betrayal. Gabriel sensed her unease immediately. He walked into the apartment, his eyes searching hers with a mixture of concern and frustration. "Amelia, what's going on?" he asked, his voice tense. "You've been distant. I can feel you slipping away." Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. She had to make a decision, one that would determine the future of their relationship, and possibly her safety. But no matter what choice she made, she knew there would be consequences. "I'm just overwhelmed," she said, her voice shaky. "There's so much happening, and I don't know who to trust." Gabriel's expression softened, and he stepped closer to her, reaching out to take her hand. "You can trust me, Amelia. I know things have been difficult, but I'm doing everything I can to protect you. You have to believe that." Amelia looked into his eyes, searching for the truth, but all she found was the same uncertainty she had been grappling with for weeks. She wanted to believe him, but the shadow of doubt loomed too large to ignore. "I need you to tell me the truth, Gabriel," she said, her voice trembling. "All of it. No more secrets." Gabriel's jaw tightened, and for a moment, she saw a flicker of something dark in his eyes. But then he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I've told you everything that matters," he said softly. "I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to make things right." "That's not enough," Amelia whispered. "I need to know everything, Gabriel. If we're going to be together, there can't be any more lies." Gabriel's face hardened, and he pulled his hand away from hers. "You don't understand what you're asking, Amelia. There are things I can't tell you, not because I don't want to, but because it's too dangerous." "Dangerous for who?" Amelia asked, her voice rising with frustration. "For you. Or for me?" Gabriel's eyes flashed with anger. "For both of us." Amelia took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. "So, you're still keeping things from me? After everything we've been through?" "I'm trying to protect you," Gabriel shouted, his voice echoing through the apartment. "Don't you get that? If I tell you everything, you'll be in even more danger." Amelia's hands trembled as she stared at him, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm already in danger, Gabriel. I've been in danger since the day I met you. The least you can do is tell me the truth." For a long moment they stood there in silence, the tension between them thick and suffocating. Gabriel's face was a mask of frustration and regret, but Amelia could see the fear in his eyes, fear for her, or fear of losing control, she wasn't sure. Finally, Gabriel spoke, his voice low and filled with pain. "I love you, Amelia. I'm trying to protect you because I can't lose you. But if you really want the truth, I'll tell you." Amelia's breath caught in her throat as she waited for him to continue, her heart pounding with anticipation. Gabriel took a deep breath, his eyes locking onto hers. I never really left the business. I told you I was trying to go legit, and that's true. I've been working toward that. But it's complicated. The people I'm involved with, they don't let go easily. I've had to make deals, to compromise in ways I didn't want to, just to keep us both safe. Amelia's heart sank. So, you've been lying to me. Not lying, Gabriel said quickly, stepping toward her. I just didn't want you to get caught up in it. I thought I could protect you by keeping you out of it. Amelia shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. You should have told me. You should have trusted me enough to tell me the truth. I know, Gabriel whispered, his voice thick with regret. I'm sorry, Amelia. I never wanted this for us. Amelia's heart ached as she looked at him, torn between the love she still felt for him and the crushing weight of his betrayal. She wanted to forgive him, to believe that they could somehow find a way through this. But deep down, she knew that things had changed. The trust between them had been shattered, and she wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. I need time, she said softly, pulling away from him. I can't do this right now. Gabriel's face fell, but he didn't try to stop her. He nodded, his eyes filled with pain. Take all the time you need, he said quietly. As Amelia walked toward the door, her heart heavy with grief, she couldn't help but wonder if this was the end, not just of their relationship, but of the life she had been trying to build with Gabriel. The man she had fallen in love with had been hiding secrets from her all along, and now that the truth was out, she wasn't sure if there was any way to move forward. The unraveling Amelia spent the next few days in a state of emotional turmoil. She didn't contact Gabriel, and he didn't reach out to her. She knew he was giving her space, but the silence between them felt suffocating. She had never felt so alone. The doubts that Daniel had planted in her mind continued to fester, and now, with Gabriel's confession weighing on her heart, she wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Part of her still loved Gabriel, still wanted to believe that he was trying to protect her. But the other part of her couldn't shake the feeling that he had been using her, manipulating her from the very beginning. One evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, her phone buzzed with a new message. She glanced at the screen, her heart skipping a beat when she saw the name. Daniel. Her fingers trembled as she opened the message. I have the proof you need. Meet me tomorrow at noon. Same place. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. Proof. If Daniel had proof that Gabriel was still involved in the illegal activities, she would finally have the answers she had been searching for. But meeting with Daniel again felt dangerous. She wasn't sure if she could trust him any more than she could trust Gabriel. Still, the need for answers was too strong to ignore. Amelia typed out a reply. I'll be there. Part 9. The final truth. The next day, Amelia arrived at the cafe with her heart pounding in her chest. She had barely slept the night before, her mind racing with thoughts of what Daniel would show her. This meeting felt like the moment everything would come to a head, the moment she would finally learn the truth about Gabriel, and about her place in this dangerous game. When she stepped inside, Daniel was already there, sitting at the same corner table they had met at before. His expression was calm, almost too calm, and it made her uneasy. There was a smugness in his eyes, as though he knew he had her exactly where he wanted her. Amelia walked over and sat down across from him, her hands trembling slightly as she placed them on the table. "Amelia," Daniel greeted her, his voice smooth. "I'm glad you came." "Just get to the point," she said, her voice sharp with frustration. "You said you had proof." Daniel smiled, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small folder and slid it across the table toward her. "Everything you need to know is in here." Amelia hesitated for a moment before taking the folder and opening it. Inside were a series of documents, financial records, emails, and photographs, all of them connecting Gabriel to illegal transactions and shady dealings. Her heart sank as she flipped through the pages, her worst fears confirmed. "This can't be real," she whispered, her hands shaking as she looked at the evidence. "It's very real," Daniel said softly, leaning back in his chair. "Gabriel has been playing you from the start. He never stopped working with the people he's been laundering money for. In fact, he's gotten deeper into it since you two started seeing each other." Amelia's chest tightened with a wave of nausea. She wanted to scream, to cry, to deny everything she was seeing, but the proof was right in front of her. Gabriel had lied to her, used her, and now, she was caught in the middle of something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What do you get out of this?" Daniel's smile widened, and he leaned forward, his gaze intense. "Because I want you to see Gabriel for who he really is. I want you to understand that he's not the man you think he is. And because I care about you, Amelia. You deserve better than to be someone's pawn." Amelia's heart pounded as she stared at him. There was something predatory about the way Daniel was looking at her, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. "You care about me?" she echoed, her voice filled with disbelief. "Is that why you've been manipulating me this whole time? Trying to turn me against Gabriel?" "I'm trying to save you," Daniel said, his voice cool. "Gabriel is dangerous, and if you stay with him, you're going to get hurt. But if you walk away now, I can protect you." Amelia's mind reeled. She was caught between two men who both claimed to want to protect her, but neither of them had been honest with her from the start. The only difference now was that Daniel had shown her proof that Gabriel was still involved in illegal activities, proof that she had been lied to. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. Daniel reached across the table and gently touched her hand. "You're strong, Amelia. Stronger than you realize. But you need to make the right choice here. Walk away from Gabriel before it's too late." Amelia pulled her hand away, her mind swirling with confusion. She wanted to believe that Daniel was telling the truth, but there was still a part of her that felt like she was being manipulated all over again. "I need time to think," she said, her voice shaky. Daniel's expression darkened for a brief moment before softening again. "Of course. Take all the time you need. But just remember, Gabriel isn't going to stop. He'll keep pulling you deeper into his world, and eventually, you won't be able to escape." Amelia stood up, the folder clutched tightly in her hands. She couldn't stay here any longer. She needed space, time to process everything she had just learned. Without another word, she turned and walked out of the cafe, her heart pounding in her chest as she made her way back to her apartment. Confrontation. When Amelia returned to her apartment, she immediately locked the door behind her and leaned against it, trying to calm the storm of emotions raging inside her. She had the proof now, the evidence she needed to confront Gabriel. But what would she do with it? Would she end things with him? Go to the authorities? Or would she let herself be dragged deeper into this dangerous world? She didn't have long to think. A knock at the door startled her, and her heart raced when she saw it was Gabriel. He entered the apartment, his eyes filled with concern. "Amelia, I've been worried about you. Why haven't you been answering my calls?" Amelia stared at him, the weight of the folder in her hands suddenly feeling unbearable. "I've been with Daniel," she said softly. Gabriel's face darkened, and he stepped closer, his voice low and tense. "What did he tell you?" "He showed me this," Amelia said, holding up the folder. "Proof that you're still involved with illegal activities. That you never really left the business." Gabriel's eyes flashed with anger as he took a step back. "Daniel's lying to you. He's trying to manipulate you." "Is he?" Amelia asked, her voice trembling. "Because everything in here looks pretty convincing to me." Gabriel's jaw clenched, and he reached out to take the folder from her, but she pulled it away, stepping back. "Amelia, listen to me," Gabriel said, his voice filled with desperation. "I've been trying to get out of this, but it's not that simple. You have to believe me. I never wanted to drag you into this, but I didn't have a choice." "You always have a choice, Gabriel," Amelia said, tears welling up in her eyes. "You chose to lie to me. You chose to keep me in the dark. How can I believe anything you say now?" "Because I love you," Gabriel said, his voice breaking. "I've been trying to protect you this whole time, and I would do anything to keep you safe. But you have to trust me, Amelia. Daniel is using you to get to me. He's trying to destroy everything we have." Amelia's heart ached as she looked into Gabriel's eyes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he was telling her the truth. But the betrayal she felt was too deep, and the doubt that had been festering inside her for weeks was stronger than ever. "I don't know if I could trust you anymore," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. Gabriel stepped closer, his expression filled with pain. "Amelia, please. I know I've made mistakes, but I can fix this. We can fix this." But as she stood there, the weight of everything that had happened pressed down on her like a suffocating blanket. She was caught between two men, two versions of the truth, and she didn't know which way to turn. Finally, she took a deep breath and shook her head. "I need time, Gabriel. I need time to figure out what's real." Gabriel's face fell, and he nodded, his voice filled with sorrow. "I'll give you all the time you need. But please, don't let Daniel come between us." As Gabriel turned and walked out of the apartment, Amelia sank to the floor, her heart shattered. She had been betrayed by the man she loved, manipulated by the man who claimed to be helping her, and now, she was left alone, unsure of what to believe or who to trust. The folder lay open beside her, the evidence staring back at her like a cruel reminder of everything that had gone wrong. But even as she sat there, broken and confused, she knew one thing for certain: the truth, whatever it was, would come out. And when it did, she would have to decide whether to walk away from Gabriel forever or risk everything to save the man she once thought she knew. Part 10. The choice days passed, but the weight of the decision Amelia had to make never eased. Each morning, she woke up with the same questions circling in her mind. Who could she trust? Was Daniel's evidence genuine, or was it another manipulation? Could she still believe in the man she once thought Gabriel was? Gabriel hadn't contacted her since their last conversation. It was as if he understood that pushing her now would only drive her further away. But the silence between them only made things worse. Without any contact, she was left alone with her thoughts, spiraling deeper into doubt and fear. Amelia glanced at the folder Daniel had given her. It sat on her coffee table like a silent accusation, reminding her that she had the power to expose Gabriel's crimes, if that was what she chose to do. But every time she considered going to the authorities, a voice in her head whispered that she still didn't know the whole truth. She needed closure. She needed to confront Daniel one last time. The final meeting the following afternoon, Amelia found herself standing outside the cafe where she had met Daniel twice before. This time, however, something felt different. There was a tension in the air, a sense that this meeting would be the one to decide everything. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room for Daniel. He was there, sitting at the same corner table, his calm demeanor as unnerving as ever. But today, Amelia wasn't here to be manipulated. She had questions, and she wasn't leaving without answers. As she approached the table, Daniel smiled, standing up to greet her. "Amelia," he said smoothly, "I wasn't sure if you'd come." She sat down, her eyes fixed on him. "I need the truth, Daniel. All of it." Daniel's smile faltered for a brief moment, but he quickly recovered, leaning back in his chair with a casual air. "I've already told you the truth. Gabriel is using you. The evidence I gave you proves that." "That's not enough," Amelia said, her voice steady. "I need to know why you're doing this. Why do you care so much about destroying Gabriel? What's really going on between the two of you?" Daniel's eyes darkened slightly, and for the first time, Amelia saw a flicker of something raw beneath his calm exterior. "Gabriel and I were once partners, as I'm sure you know. We built an empire together, but then he betrayed me. He tried to cut me out, to take everything we'd built and leave me with nothing. Is that why you're trying to ruin him?" Amelia asked, her heart pounding. "Because he betrayed you." Daniel's smile was cold. "I'm not trying to ruin him, Amelia. I'm trying to stop him. Gabriel isn't the man you think he is. He's dangerous, and if you stay with him, you'll only get hurt." Amelia's hands trembled slightly as she listened to Daniel's words, but she couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that there was more to the story than he was telling her. She leaned forward, her eyes locked onto his. "Why should I trust you?" she asked quietly. "You've been manipulating me from the start. You've been using me just like Gabriel has." For the first time, Daniel's expression faltered. He leaned forward, his voice lowering to a more urgent tone. "I'm not manipulating you, Amelia. I'm trying to protect you." "From what?" Amelia demanded, her voice rising. "From Gabriel. Or from you." Silence hung between them for a long moment. Daniel's eyes flickered with something dark, something that sent a chill down Amelia's spine. She had been right all along. Daniel had his own agenda, and whatever it wasn't just about protecting her. "Amelia," Daniel said softly, his voice almost soothing, "you need to walk away from Gabriel. He's not going to change, and if you stay with him, you'll be dragged into his world. You don't want that." Amelia stared at him, her heart pounding in her chest. She had been so sure that Daniel was telling her the truth, that he was trying to help her, but now she could see the cracks in his carefully crafted facade. "Maybe I don't want to walk away," she said quietly, her voice trembling. Maybe I need to hear Gabriel's side of the story before I make any decisions. Daniel's eyes darkened, and for the first time, Amelia saw the cold, calculating man that Gabriel had warned her about. His smile faded, replaced by a hard, unyielding expression. "If you go back to Gabriel," Daniel said, his voice low and threatening, "you'll regret it. I've given you everything you need to destroy him, but if you choose to stay with him, you'll be on your own." Amelia's breath caught in her throat. The threat in Daniel's words was clear. If she didn't do what he wanted, there would be consequences. For a moment, she felt paralyzed by fear, but then a surge of determination washed over her. She had been manipulated for too long, by both Gabriel and Daniel. It was time to take control of her own life. "I'm not scared of you," Amelia said, her voice steady. "I'll make my own choices." Daniel's expression hardened, but he didn't say another word. Instead, he stood up and walked out of the cafe, leaving Amelia sitting alone with the folder of evidence and the weight of the decision she had to make. A choice made later that night, Amelia found herself standing outside Gabriel's apartment. Her heart was racing, her mind spinning with everything that had happened over the past few weeks. But she knew one thing for certain: she couldn't live in fear anymore. She needed the truth, and she needed to hear it from Gabriel. When he opened the door, his face was etched with concern. "Amelia," he breathed, "I didn't think you'd come." "I need answers," she said quietly, stepping inside. Gabriel nodded, his expression somber. "I'll tell you everything." For the next hour, Gabriel laid everything bare. He told her about his past with Daniel, about the illegal activities they had been involved in, and about the deals he had made to protect both of them. He didn't sugarcoat anything, and for the first time, Amelia felt like she was hearing the full truth. "I know I've made mistakes," Gabriel said, his voice raw with emotion. "But I'm trying to get out of this. I'm trying to fix it. And I swear to you, I never meant to hurt you." Amelia's heart ached as she listened to him. She could see the pain in his eyes, the regret for the choices he had made. But she also knew that their relationship would never be the same. Too much had happened, too many lies had been told. "I believe you," she said softly, her voice trembling. "But I don't think I can stay." Gabriel's face fell, and for a moment, he looked like he was about to break. "Amelia, please, I love you," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "But I can't live like this. I need to feel safe, and I don't think I ever will if I stay." Gabriel nodded slowly, his eyes filled with sorrow. "I understand." For a long moment, they stood there in silence, the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on them. Amelia's heart felt like it was shattering into a million pieces, but she knew this was the right decision. She couldn't keep living in fear, caught between two men who had both lied to her. As she turned to leave, Gabriel reached out and gently took her hand. "I'll always love you, Amelia. And I'll always be sorry for what I did." Amelia looked back at him, her heart breaking all over again. "I'll always love you too." With that, she walked out of his apartment, leaving behind the man she had once thought she could spend her life with. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in weeks, she felt like she was finally in control of her own destiny. Epilogue: a new beginning. Months passed, and slowly, Amelia began to rebuild her life. She moved into a new apartment, far away from the memories of Gabriel and the dangers of his world. She cut off all contact with Daniel, refusing to let him manipulate her any further. It wasn't easy, And there were days when she still missed Gabriel, when the ache of their lost love felt unbearable. But with time, the pain began to fade, replaced by a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in a long time. She had made her choice, and though it had been one of the hardest decisions of her life, it had also been the right one. Amelia had learned the power of trusting herself, of finding strength in her own choices. And as she looked toward the future, she knew she could face whatever came next, on her own terms.